The first-class lounge at the airport buzzed with quiet conversation, the kind of atmosphere where everyone assumed they belonged. Ethan Cole, CEO of a global tech company, was reading over a contract on his tablet, his carry-on neatly by his side. He'd arrived early, secured his VIP seat by the window, and was enjoying a rare moment of calm before a critical board meeting overseas. That calm shattered when a sharply dressed airline supervisor approached, flanked by two gate agents. She didn't smile. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to give up your seat. We have another passenger who will be taking this spot." Her tone wasn't a request, it was an order. Ethan looked up, confused. "There must be a mistake. I'm in the system. My ticket is confirmed." The supervisor didn't even check. "It doesn't matter. This seat is reserved for a priority passenger. You'll need to move now." Around them, other guests pretended not to watch, but their eyes flickered with curiosity. Ethan could feel the shift, the quiet judgment, the silent question of whether he really belonged there. He stood slowly, his voice calm. "If this is the way you treat a loyal customer, I'll remember it." They had no idea just how much he meant that. Ethan picked up his bag and stepped aside, watching as a man in an expensive suit strolled in and claimed the seat without so much as a glance in his direction. The airline supervisor smiled warmly at the newcomer, a courtesy she hadn't offered Ethan once. He walked toward the far corner of the lounge, his mind working faster than his steps. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a message. They had dismissed him without even verifying who he was, assuming he had less importance than their so-called priority guest. Ethan sat down, opened his laptop, and typed out a quick email. His assistant back at headquarters replied within minutes, confirming what Ethan already knew: the airline was under contract with his company for a multimillion-dollar tech systems upgrade. His jaw tightened. They have no idea who they just pushed aside. He watched the supervisor walk past again, laughing with the staff, blissfully unaware that every second brought them closer to the moment she would regret this. Because Ethan wasn't just a CEO. He was their CEO's CEO, one email away from changing everything. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly against the laptop as he composed a second message, this one addressed directly to the airline's corporate office and its board of directors. His words were measured, professional, but laced with an unmistakable undertone: "This is unacceptable, and it will have consequences." He didn't send it just yet. Timing was everything. The lounge's glass wall gave him a clear view of the gate. The supervisor who had ordered him out of the seat was now instructing another employee to prepare champagne for the priority passenger. Her demeanor was almost rehearsed, dripping with hospitality Ethan had been blatantly denied. His phone buzzed. It was a call from his head of operations. "Ethan, we've just finalized the renewal documents for the airline's contract. Do you want me to send them over for your signature?" Ethan's lips curved into a thin smile. "Not yet. We might be making adjustments." From his seat in the corner, he looked at the staff who had dismissed him, each one busy, unaware that the next decision he made could change their careers forever. The power balance in the room was about to shift, and when it did, it wouldn't be subtle. The boarding announcement echoed softly through the lounge, but Ethan stayed seated, sipping his coffee as if he had all the time in the world. He watched the priority passenger leave for the gate, trailed by the same supervisor who had so confidently ordered him out of his seat. When she returned, she noticed him still there and gave a polite but dismissive nod, clearly assuming the matter was long forgotten. Ethan met her gaze just long enough for her to feel the weight of it before looking back at his laptop. That was when he sent the email. It wasn't long, just 3 paragraphs. The first detailed the incident, with names, times, and exact wording. The second outlined his company's role in supplying critical technology to the airline. And the final paragraph made his decision clear: effective immediately, we are halting all collaboration until we can meet directly with the airline's CEO to address the treatment I received. Additionally, I request the immediate dismissal of the employees involved in this incident. He hit send and closed the laptop with a quiet click. Somewhere in the corporate offices of the airline, alarms were about to start ringing, metaphorically and perhaps literally. And here in the lounge, the people responsible had no idea that their careers had just been placed on the chopping block. That IT took less than 15 minutes. Ethan was halfway through his coffee when a man in a tailored navy suit, wearing a company badge, entered the lounge with urgency in his stride. He scanned the room until his eyes locked on Ethan, and then he made a beeline for him. "Mr. Cole," the man asked, slightly out of breath. "I'm the Regional Operations Director." We just received an urgent message from headquarters." Ethan simply nodded, letting the man continue. "There's been a misunderstanding. We were unaware of who you were," and Ethan raised a hand, cutting him off. "It's not about who I am. It's about how you treat people. And your team failed that test today, spectacularly." The director glanced nervously toward the supervisor and her staff, who were now watching the conversation with growing confusion. "Mr. Cole, we're prepared to make this right immediately. The staff involved will be relieved of duty before this flight even leaves the ground." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Good. Then call your CEO. Tell them the contract is still under review, and that it depends entirely on how fast you act." The color drained from the director's face as he nodded and pulled out his phone. The quiet hum of the lounge felt suddenly heavier. Everyone could sense that something was unfolding, something big, and they had no idea just how close they were to the center of it. The director stepped aside to make the call, his voice hushed but urgent. Ethan could still catch pieces of the conversation, phrases like "serious incident," "VIP contract," and "immediate termination." Across the room, the supervisor who had ordered Ethan out of his seat stood frozen, her earlier confidence evaporating. The two gate agents beside her shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other, their eyes darting toward Ethan and then away. A few minutes later, the director returned, his expression carefully neutral but his body language tense. "Mr. Cole, the CEO has been informed. She's instructed me to handle this on the spot." He turned to the supervisor and staff. "You three, come with me. Now." His voice was sharp, leaving no room for questions. The supervisor opened her mouth, perhaps to defend herself, but the director didn't give her the chance. "You're being relieved of duty effective immediately. Collect your things." Gasps rippled through the lounge. The priority passengers, the casual observers, even the staff behind the bar, all were suddenly alert, realizing this was no ordinary corporate complaint. Ethan stood, collecting his bag. "I'll be boarding now," he said evenly. "Send me the revised contract proposal when you're ready." And as he walked toward the gate, the lounge behind him felt different, quieter, heavier, because everyone had just witnessed what happens when arrogance meets real power. As Ethan handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, she gave him a nervous smile, clearly aware of what had just transpired in the lounge. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Cole," she said softly, her tone carrying both respect and a hint of apology. He stepped into the jet bridge, the low hum of the aircraft ahead welcoming him. Inside, the flight attendants greeted him warmly, guiding him to a new first-class seat, ironically, even better than the one he'd been forced to give up. As he settled in, he opened his tablet, skimming through a fresh email from his assistant. "News travels fast. The airline's CEO has requested a personal meeting with you in New York next week. She's also offering a written apology and full-service review." Ethan's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "They're scrambling now." When the doors closed and the plane began to taxi, he glanced out the window. Down below, the same supervisor who had dismissed him earlier was being escorted out of the terminal by security, her badge clipped off her uniform. It wasn't satisfaction he felt, it was confirmation. Confirmation that respect isn't about titles, appearances, or assumptions. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. And today, they had learned that lesson the hard way. The flight lifted smoothly into the clouds, but Ethan's mind wasn't on the view. He thought about the countless moments in business when people judged others based on assumptions rather than facts. Today had been a perfect example, and a perfect reminder of why leadership meant more than just holding a title. Halfway through the flight, the purser approached, carrying an envelope embossed with the airline's logo. "Mr. Cole," she said respectfully, "this was sent electronically from our corporate office and printed on board for you." Inside was a formal letter, an unreserved apology signed by the CEO herself, an invitation for a private meeting, and confirmation that a full staff retraining program would begin immediately. They also offered lifetime elite status with the airline, though Ethan barely glanced at that part. For him, this wasn't about perks, it was about principle. He signed the bottom of the letter with a short note in his own hand: "I will consider renewing our partnership after I see proof of change." When the plane landed hours later, he walked off without a word, his phone already buzzing with updates from his team. The incident had traveled across industry circles at lightning speed. Everyone was talking about the airline that tried to push aside the wrong man, and how, within minutes, their entire corporate hierarchy had been shaken. Ethan didn't need to tell the story. The story would tell itself. By the next morning, Ethan's name was trending in industry news feeds, not because he sought attention, but because someone in the lounge had filmed part of the incident. The short clip showed him calmly packing his bag when ordered to move, followed by the arrival of the regional director. Viewers didn't need to hear the whole conversation to understand the shift in tone. Articles sprang up with headlines like, "Tech Giant CEO Halts Airline Contract After VIP Mistreatment," and, "One Seat, One Mistake, Millions Lost." Corporate blogs analyzed it as a case study in customer service gone wrong, while business schools debated it as a lesson in power dynamics. Inside the airline's headquarters, executives worked around the clock to contain the fallout. The CEO herself called Ethan twice, once to apologize again, and once to ask for his input on rewriting their customer service policy. Ethan agreed to meet, not because he needed their business, but because he wanted to make sure no one else would be treated the way he had been. As he walked into his office that afternoon, his assistant handed him a fresh stack of proposals from competing airlines, each one offering better terms, better service guarantees, and personal assurances from their CEOs. Ethan chuckled quietly. One Seat had started it all. But the real win was the reminder that influence, used wisely, could change more than just a contract. It could change an entire culture. Weeks later, Ethan arrived at the airline's headquarters for the promised meeting. The CEO greeted him personally in the lobby, her handshake firm but her expression humble. She led him into a glass-walled conference room where several senior executives waited, notepads open, ready to listen. Instead of talking about the contract right away, Ethan began with a story, about a small regional airport years ago, when he was a young entrepreneur in worn-out shoes, ignored by every staff member until one kind attendant treated him with respect. That single moment had stuck with him, shaping the way he treated people in his own company. "This isn't about me," he told them. "It's about the people you don't recognize as important until it's too late. You never know who you're talking to, or who they might become." The room was silent. Several executives shifted in their seats, clearly reflecting on his words. Only then did he agree to reinstate the tech contract, but with strict conditions: mandatory staff empathy training, quarterly service audits, and a direct reporting line to his office if high-value clients were mistreated. The CEO signed without hesitation. Months later, airline reviews began to shift. Customers noted friendlier staff, more attentive service, and faster problem resolution. Ethan didn't need public credit, he knew the change had taken root. And every time he walked into a VIP lounge after that, he carried himself the same way as before, calm, courteous, but always aware that respect, once given, had the power to ripple far beyond the moment. Nearly a year after the incident, Ethan boarded another flight with the same airline. This time, the atmosphere in the VIP lounge felt different, warmer, more attentive, and free of the quiet hierarchy that had once dictated who belonged. The staff recognized him instantly, but instead of fawning over his position, they treated him exactly as they did every guest, offering genuine smiles, assistance, and even remembering small preferences like his usual coffee order. As he sipped his drink, a young attendant approached. "Mr. Cole, I just wanted to say. I was hired after the new training program began. They told us your story during onboarding, not to scare us, but to remind us that every customer deserves respect." Ethan smiled. That's the only part of the story that matters. Later, on the flight, he overheard two passengers talking about how the airline service had improved dramatically. Neither knew who he was, but he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing he'd had a hand in that transformation. Back at his company, his leadership team had noticed the same principle playing out internally, managers being more attentive to staff, executives listening to ideas from interns, and a culture of respect spreading naturally. The day he'd been ordered out of his seat had been humiliating in the moment. But looking back now, Ethan realized it was the spark that had ignited something far more valuable than a business win. It had created a ripple of change, one seat at a time. Months later, Ethan found himself in a quiet corner of another airport, far from home. His flight was delayed, and the lounge was full of tired travelers. A young man in worn jeans and a backpack approached the counter, looking nervous as he asked the attendant if there were any open seats. The attendant glanced at the chart and shook her head. "I'm sorry, we're full." Before the disappointment could set in, Ethan stepped forward. "You can take my seat," he said with an easy smile. "I've got some work to do anyway." The young man's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Ethan replied. "Enjoy it." As the man settled into the chair, Ethan went back to his corner table, opening his laptop. He thought about the irony. Once, someone had taken his seat without a second thought, and it had sparked a chain of events that changed an entire company. Now, by choice, he'd given his seat away, quietly, without recognition. Because in the end, the real power wasn't in taking seats, it was in deciding who you lifted up when you had the chance. And that, Ethan knew, was the kind of influence that didn't just last a moment, it lasted a lifetime.